rather than try to rebuild the existing quiz, which was okay, but not great, we would just go ahead and create EMMA, the Email Marketing Map Assessment. So we did. And what we did then was we launched EMMA on Monday, and then we were going to start advertising direct kind of promotion of the webinar that Thursday. But what we did is we had people go through the assessment, then they got their results, and then they were nurtured into signing up for the webinar. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there, welcome to episode 149 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm excited for today's episode because it's one of the kinds of episode that I know a lot of my listeners enjoy the most. This is a recap of my recent launch. Now, last week, I kind of did a recap of the things I've learned this first quarter, the lessons I learned in the first quarter of 2020. Well, this episode, I'm recapping the launch that we ran in March it was kind of a hybrid launch, and it was where I unveiled my new program, Badass Email Marketing. And I wanted to dive in and give you the details about the launch so you know kind of what happened, what worked, what was the plan, what were we doing, and how were we doing it. So that's what we have in store. That's what we have on tap. And I wanted to go ahead and share that with you. Now, before we dive in, though, this episode is brought to you by a membership guide created by my friend Stu McLaren. Now, Stu is the person who taught me how to create a membership site. So my Fans First Society membership site, which is my signature offer on the business stuff side of my business, and we're going to be talking about it today, was created with the help of his program Tribe. And Stu has a fantastic guide that you can get, which is called it's a step-by-step guide to launch a successful and profitable membership site if you're thinking about launching a membership site. It is a very in-depth guide that will walk you through kind of things you need to think about to decide if a membership is right for you, how to choose the best kind of membership, how to start a paid membership, rules for naming your membership, all of the things. And there's a lot more. And so he's got all of that in this free guide that you can get your hands on that really is kind of a soup to nuts description to help you make this decision. And you can get your copy by heading over to bobbyklink.com/membership guide. Again, bobbyklink.com/membership guide. It'll take you over to Stu's website where you can download and get your copy of the membership guide. So with that, let's dive in to this launch recap. So this launch, if you followed along, it will be familiar to you. But if you didn't, or if you really weren't paying attention, I'm going to give you an overview, first of all, of what the offer was. And this was a hybrid offer because ultimately what we were asking people to do was to join my Fans First Society, that membership site I mentioned a minute ago, as annual members. In other words, commit to be in the membership for a year. And our annual subscription price is $470. I give way too much value in the Fans First Society at that price. You get a There's kind of a core training, which is about what I call my fans framework for finding, attracting, nurturing, and serving your ideal customers and really turning people into raving fans is the point of it. In addition to that core training, though, there's a workshop every single month about business building, marketing, etc. And people have loved those, have said that those workshops in and of themselves are worth more than the cost of admission. Then we have Q&A and coaching with my social media manager, with my integrator, and with me. So one each of those per month. So there's a ton of value packed into this membership site. But here's the thing. When you're thinking about membership sites, there's a few different ways that you can go about launching it. And one of the ways is what's called a football phone. And a football phone is a concept that comes from Sports Illustrated back in the 1980s when they were trying to get people to subscribe to their magazine. Their ads would talk primarily about, hey, we have this awesome football phone, literally a phone shaped like a football, and we want to give it to you for free, and we will if you subscribe to the magazine. So that's the concept of a football phone launch for a membership site. The idea is that you're talking about this other thing, not the membership, and say, and I'm going to give it to you for free if you join my membership or if you subscribe. And so that's the concept. And our launch the concept was that we were going to use my new signature course that we're creating called Badass Email Marketing as the football phone. In other words, we would give anyone who joined as an annual member access to this new course that will teach people everything they need to know about email marketing. So the new program walks from the step of basic concepts to what is the very first email you send to your list, all the way through your nurture sequence, your welcome sequence, your weekly emails, your promo sequence, and then even the other emails, things like list scrub emails, etc. So that's what the program is. And it really is a full-on signature course and implementation program all in one that should be a standalone product. But we decided that we would create it, and because I like to treat my existing members kind of like royalty, and because I like treating my members generally like royalty, the idea was that we would include it as part of the Fans First Society for anyone who was an annual member. So that was the plan, and that was the idea, and that was the goal. We came up with a launch plan. This was going to be primarily an internal launch. And if you don't know what an internal launch is, that means that it's primarily focused on your existing audience. It is not about going out and growing your audience and doing a bunch of advertising with Facebook ads to cold traffic, etc. Instead, your focus is, hey, let's make an offer to our existing audience to see how it works. Oftentimes, what you will do is you will use an internal launch to test a new offer. When you have a new offer that you're thinking about doing, you generally don't want to go and spend a bunch of money on Facebook ads. Instead, you want to offer it to your existing audience, see how it performs, make sure that your audience generally believes it's a good offer. And then if it is, you have a proven offer, and then you can make plans to offer it more broadly. So that was our plan, to do an internal launch. And we knew we were going to do a webinar, partly because, there are other launch mechanisms we could have used, things like a video series or this new combination that my friend James, or my coach James Wedmore, is teaching, where you combine a 3-part video series and a challenge into one. And we thought about doing those. But the reality was that, number one, this was an internal launch. Number two, our thinking was that we might, at some point want to create assets that could become evergreen. And a webinar is best for anything that is evergreen. But more importantly, when we looked at our time schedule, a webinar worked better, because I run webinars many times. I knew I could create a webinar without a ton of, kind of reinventing the wheel. Now, I had to create all new content for the webinar, but I'm comfortable with the process of webinars. And so I could just execute a plan that I knew how to execute. So that we knew was going to be our launch vehicle. Then we also decided to throw a little wrinkle in. Initially, we had a plan that, let me back up. If you've been here a while, maybe you've heard me talk about my email marketing map assessment. We lovingly call it EMMA inside my business. This is a quiz that we created to help entrepreneurs figure out how to what emails they need to be sending. Think of it as kind of like a Myers-Briggs. You get a score that has 4 letters that tells you the kind of map you need to be using for your emails in your business. That's what it is. And I came up with this about a little less than a month before we were going to be doing the launch. And so initially the idea was that I would go ahead and create that. And once someone signed up for the webinar, we would send them through a quick and dirty version and they would get their results. We called an audible, and we called an audible because there were some tech issues with our existing lead magnets and with the existing quiz I had created. And so we decided, rather than try to rebuild the existing quiz, which was okay, but not great, we would just go ahead and create EMMA, the email marketing map assessment. So we did. And what we did then was we launched EMMA on Monday, I think it was March 9th, but we launched it on a Monday. And then we were going to start advertising direct kind of promotion of the webinar that Thursday. But what we did is we had people go through the assessment, then they got their results, and then they were nurtured into signing up for the webinar. That was the plan. So it was basically, we can bring them into this freebie. Then the freebie will take them into the webinar, and then we will directly promote the webinar. So that was the plan, and that was what we came up with as our final launch plan. Then let me talk briefly about what our goals were. And me being me, I kind of had this crazy notion that we would get 500 people to sign up for the webinar. And I say crazy notion because I've mentioned this many times, but my active email list that I'm actually actively emailing at any given time is usually between 5,000 and 5,500 people. Because I clean my list, I keep it clean, I scrub people off if they're not opening. I'm constantly doing list hygiene and not kicking people off, but they don't want to open the emails. Cool, fine. So we're not going to email them. So with that, I was essentially saying, let's get 10% of my list to sign up for the webinar. That is a pretty aggressive goal. That would be quite a thing, but that was my goal. And then my goal was $25,000 in revenue. Again, it was not a huge revenue goal because the price point for an annual membership is $470. So that means, at a price point like that, you can't expect to make a ton of money from each registrant. But even that, to say that I was expecting to essentially make $50 per webinar registrant is pretty aggressive. That is a $50 earnings per lead, which most people would tell you, especially for a first launch, is a very good earnings per lead. So those were the goals. That was the plan. That was the offer. Now, let's talk about how it worked out and what happened. But before I talk about the results, let's talk for a second about the timing here. Just to kind of jog your memory about what was happening. And I'm looking up at my calendar to make sure that I have everything right. Yeah, and I do. We launched EMMA, the assessment, on March 9th. We started inviting people to the webinar on March 12th. We then did the webinars on March 18th. Now, let me put anchor that with some time. March 11th, so the day before we started to openly promote the webinar, was the day of it was the day that Trump gave his speech from the Oval Office. It was the day that the NBA canceled their season. It was the day that coronavirus got real for the United States. So I tell you that to give you a sense of where things were and what was going on in the world when I was doing this. So literally, I start actively promoting the webinar the day after, the ish hits the fan. We do our webinar about a week later, and our cart was open when things were starting to get pretty bad in New York. You were starting to see this acceleration of, things happening. So that's what was happening in the world. And I give you that because I saw this stuff happening, and I heard from people who were wondering, they had plans to launch, and they were trying to decide whether to keep going or not. And some people decided not to. Some people decided they weren't going to push forward. They were just going to delay indefinitely. I believe that was a mistake. I believed it was a mistake because, candidly, I believed and continue to believe that the situation we're in is going to last for a while. It's not going to get better overnight. And so if you're going to delay, how long are you going to delay? More importantly, one of the things I said to people is, if we have a business that we can safely do without interacting with people, without putting ourselves at risk, in many ways, I believe not only should we, but we almost have an obligation to push forward. And that was partly because, look, I recognize that you were going to have all of these brick and mortar businesses that were going to be shut down, and that part of the economy was going to stop. And I felt like, hey, if we can at least keep this other part, this online part of the economy running, that's helpful. But more importantly, I recognize that there are people in my audience who would want this offer. They would want to learn how to build a raving fan base. They would want to learn how to write great emails. And they might also be in a position where they said, these skills are more important than ever, considering what's happening in the world, considering the shifts that we are seeing and are going to continue to see. So I decided to push forward, and I had no idea what was going to happen. What I will tell you is, on the day that we started promotion of the webinar, so that Thursday, so this was the day after the NBA cancels its season, the day after the Oval Office address, I'm just going to tell you that day, that Thursday, Facebook ads were a nightmare. We saw all of our stuff, all of our existing ads and everything just go haywire. And I think part of that is like, this was a day of shock. A lot of people were not sure what to do, not sure what to make of things. So there was just a lot of weirdness happening. And, we weren't spending a ton of money. We were spending some money on Facebook ads, primarily to a warm audience, to my existing audience of people on my email list and people who had interacted with my page and things like that. But we were spending some money, and we were seeing, kind of looking at the costs. And that day they were ugly, but they did settle down. So I was proven right that the world didn't kind of come to an end when it came to online marketing. So we pushed forward. And let me now give you the stats so you can get a sense of where we ended up. Remember, I had said my goal was 500 people on the webinar and about $25,000 in revenue, which would have equated, I think, to 54 sales, I think is what it would have amounted to, was our estimate. And again, actually, let me back up. At that point, going into this, we were not going to offer a payment plan, because it was an annual membership. I also have a monthly membership, but the monthly members were not going to get access. So we didn't plan to have a payment plan. So we went into this, and we ended up getting 375 people registered for the webinar. Now, candidly, my goal was 500, but I had realistically told Katie, my integrator, that 300 I thought was a realistic goal. And so we beat our realistic goal, but did not hit the 500. And so we didn't get there. And we then ended up making a total of 40 sales and brought in total booked revenue of $20,000, just over $20,000. Now, there's a couple of things I wanted you to hear there. I said booked revenue. And I said booked revenue because we decided to create a payment plan. We decided this late in the game, after the doors were open, after the cart was open. And it was based on feedback we were getting from people about what was going on in light of coronavirus. And people were worried about, again, $470 is not a huge amount of money, but when you're worried about what's going on in the world, it is. And so we created a payment plan where they could simply pay $47 a month, but they were committed to paying for 12 months. So, they were committed for a full year, but could pay monthly. Now, that changed things, and our mix ended up, we had 22 full pays and 18 people sign up for the payment plan. That payment plan, if you do the math really quickly, $47 a month times 12 ends up more than $470. It's an extra $94 per person who signs up on that payment plan. So that's why we ended up a little less than $5,000 short of our revenue goal, even though we undershot the sales by 14 sales. So those were the final statistics. Now I want to talk about kind of what happened there. And again, I don't use it as an excuse, and I'm not sad that I launched in spite of the coronavirus, but what I will tell you is I believe that is why we did not hit our goals. I've talked to peers in the industry who launched at the same time. They also did not hit their goals, but they also were generally happy with their results. And the reason why is we were in the middle of, in some sense, kind of the worst time to be doing this. If things had happened, say, if we had launched a week earlier or a week and a half earlier, we would have beat the worst of the coronavirus. And by the worst, I don't mean the worst numbers. As I'm recording this after the cart is closed, numbers are obviously worse now than they were before. And I suspect we're still on our way up and seeing worse and worse number-wise. But the time period when we were launching was the period of most uncertainty. It was the period when things were changing the most. It was the period when people were starting to come to grips with the notion that they were going to have to stay at home. It was the period when people were realizing, whoa, if I've got kids, I have to homeschool my kids and try to run my business and try to deal with my spouse at home all at the same time. It was also the period before Congress had taken action, and so it was not clear if there was going to be, monetary support or what was going to happen to people. And so all of those things and all of that uncertainty had a couple of effects in my mind. Number one, it meant that the attention span of people online was limited. And I believe that because I know my attention span was limited. I know I was drawn into looking at what was happening in the world, going on to CNN.com, checking things out, going on to the WashingtonPost.com to see what was happening. And so I know other people were doing the same thing. So that split attention is part of the issue. And I could just feel it, and I knew that was happening. Now, secondarily, I believe that really people did start tightening their wallets because they weren't sure what was going on. And the sense I got, and from talking to my peers in the industry, I got the sense that they had the same general feeling from their launches. Effectively, what happened is the people who were yeses, who would have been yeses in a normal launch, and I mean quick yeses and wouldn't have required much convincing, they still bought. The difference was among the people who you would think of as kind of the people who would have been on the fence for a while. And there are a number of people who would have been on the fence for a while and would have ultimately fallen into the yes, I'm in camp. And they were just clearly no's. So that group of people who would have likely purchased, and just so you know, like my typical launch, we end up like the last 48 hours is where we see this huge kind of uptick, almost exponential growth in sales in the last 2 days of a launch. And we saw a little bit of an uptick, but we did not see the same kind of last minute surge. And that last minute surge, those are the fence sitters. Those are the people who are there waiting. And I pulled out all the stops. I sent my emails asking, letting people text me, giving them my cell phone number, asking people to hit reply if they had questions. And I just saw way less engagement than normal. And again, that engagement is coming from the people who are on the fence and not sure. And so my conclusion was looking at it was that there was definitely some anxiety in the market about what was going on. And so that's a reality. And so I had to deal with that. And that's something I'm not going to back away from. But even with that, I don't regret for a second that we made the decision to move forward with the launch. Because again, I had 40 people join who I'm going to get to serve the living heck out of and who are going to be part of my inaugural class in Badass Email Marketing, along with the existing annual members and my founding members. So those people are going to get a ton of value from this, and it's going to be fantastic. So I'm excited about that. Now, I mentioned the payment plan. We introduced the payment plan on kind of the last few days of the launch, because one of the things that I always do in a launch with my emails, and even in my non-launch launches, but during an open cart period, is I will send an email that just invites people to send me questions. And it's normally a casual thing that says, hey, I'm going to be hanging out today, doing not much. If you've got questions, shoot me them. And so I did that, and I got responses from people. And I could tell from those responses that money was one of the big obstacles. Money was one of the big things that people were nervous about. Normally, I don't hear that. Normally, people who are in a tough spot, and maybe don't feel like they can afford my product, they don't say that. And candidly, normally on most of my products, I have a payment plan anyway, but I was getting that response. So I talked to my team on the Monday of the week we were closing cart and just talked it over with them. And we decided to go ahead and introduce the payment plan. So that's the kind of thing I give that to you so that you have a sense that you're going to have to make those kinds of decisions. You're going to have to make those decisions to pivot, to adjust during launches, et cetera, when things aren't going exactly to plan. So that's what I did. And hopefully, that's useful for you. So that is that. Now, one other thing I have to mention, and again, this is further proof in a sense in my mind that other people were distracted. One of the realities is that because I could not, or I was not as focused as normal, I did not manage to write all my emails in advance. In fact, I wrote very few of my emails in advance. My emails for this launch were largely live written. What that means is I would write them, and hopefully I would have time to have my VA proof them, and then they would go out. And so it was kind of an ongoing process. Now, there are advantages to that. I always tell people that in a promo, you want to leave room to live write some emails. But normally it's like one or two, but you have the other ones written in advance. Now, you want to have one or two that you can live write because you want to kind of, address what's happening and have some leeway to do that. Well, because, in some sense, it was good that I was live writing here. And it was good that I was live writing because things were happening in the world on a daily basis. And so I was able to literally address them almost in real time in the stories and the analogies in the content of my emails. And that meant that I was able to kind of really tap into what was happening in the world. Now, it also meant that the launch period was much more, I don't want to say stressful, but more time intensive than it normally would have been. So that was the reality. Now, when I look at this at the end of the day, there's a couple of things that stick out at me about this launch, or that jump out at me, and that I want to talk about. And so again, I've said I was very happy about the results. Now, we spent about $1,000 on Facebook ads. And that means because we got about $20,000 in sales, we made right around $19,000 in profit after Facebook ad spend. That's a pretty good day. It's a pretty good launch. And again, this was small scale, nothing big. I was not trying to catch the world on fire. We were just trying to run this the way it was. The good news is we proved out that Emma leading into some kind of vehicle works great. I mean, we're going to have Emma running my email marketing map assessment. We're going to have that running all the time, but it's proven out that it is a great kind of lead magnet straight into a webinar about email marketing. So I have that knowledge and I know that. Moreover, I proved out the offer. I was able to prove that even in spite of all the craziness in the world, I was able to get attention and I was able to convert over, somewhere over 10% of my launch list to buy the product. That's a pretty darn good result. Also, one of the statistics, one of the numbers when you are launching, whether you launch or do an email only launch, one of the things you need to track is your earnings per lead, or EPL. My EPL, based on my launch list of 375, was $55. $55 was the value of every lead who came into the webinar funnel. Now, again, it's always kind of funky because I get some additional sales from my list, et cetera, but that's, just the rate when I look at 375 generated $20,000. It's a pretty darn good day because you know that you should be able to get webinar leads for much cheaper. Just so you know, we were getting them through Emma, through everything. We were paying, less than $10 to get someone to sign up for the webinar when we were using our Facebook ads. Actually, way less than that. Our Facebook ads showed a return on investment of almost $8 for every dollar we spent. So we saw some great returns there. We saw really good results. So I walk out of this having proven out yet again that there is demand for my membership, the Fans First Society, and for my email marketing training. That now is where I sit today. I have a proven offer. We made money, and I'm proud of what my team and I accomplished in spite of everything that was going on in the world at the time. So, and again, what I've told my team, because my team tends to get down on results more than I do. Like, I don't get attached to results, so I don't feel sad, for example, or anything like that about results not hitting our goals. My team tends to a bit more. But what I stressed to them is that I have no doubt that if this had been a normal time of year, if this had not been in the middle of basically a cataclysmic event. I mean, the biggest kind of, disruption in the markets in the world that we've seen in a long, long time, we wouldn't have just hit our goals. We would have smashed our goals because we came darn close in spite of what was going on in the world. And so those are my results. And that's what, I'm walking away from this knowing and believing and having as my upshot from this. And so I wanted to do this episode because I know that people in the past have enjoyed these behind the scenes debriefs of my launches where I talk about things. And this one I thought was especially important because of the coronavirus and talking about how if you're doing things right, and again, I want to stress this, part of this is because the power of the relationship I built with my people over time, and that I've built up credibility. I've built up, a kind of a reputation about email and all of that. And I made an unbelievable offer to them. And so people were like, yes, I want in. And so this is proof of concept. It's proof of concept of this offer, but it's also proof of my offer more generally. So that's what I walk away with. I would love to hear your thoughts. You can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Bobby Klink. You can also connect with me on Facebook, the same. You can find me as Bobby Klink, or also join the Facebook group, Badass Online Marketers. I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what you think about this episode and all the others. And one other thing, if you're enjoying the podcast, do me a favor. Go and leave a rating and review. I mean, hopefully you've already subscribed, but definitely do that. But leave a rating and review on whatever podcast system you use, whether it's iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or whatever it is, go ahead and leave a rating and review there so that other people can hear and can, get to understand and kind of hear and get exposed to what I'm teaching here. So that's it. I will see you again on Friday. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.